everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. By golly, we're about ready to go with more big action.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Solie, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Championship Wrestling at ringside. This is Vince McMahon, along with wrestling's only living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, another outstanding card.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories. I am Ray Russell, and this week we pick up where we left off. Way back in Georgia Championship Wrestling, we ended the project of 1981 not that long ago, and bringing back onto the show at this point in time to kick off the 1982 project here in Georgia Championship Wrestling. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, Mr. Jammie Ward. Welcome back, Jammie.
And in your own words, Ray, I've been chomping at the bit to get back here.
Chomping at the bit. I think I stole that from you.
Man.
Well, I'm sure everybody out there has missed you, Jammie. A lot of people excited when we announced the return of Georgia. We mentioned we would be doing a season 2, if you will, here with 1982. Took a little time off to get a lot of the other projects on WrestleCopia and regional wrestling going, but it was just a matter of time, and we are back, guys. We concluded last time, Jammie. We actually ran down the house show from the Omni on January 1st, so we cheated a little. We kicked off 1982 as we ended 1981, but just a quick refresher of the things going on right out of the gate. We're going to go back and look at those results quick form here from January 1st, 1982.
All right, sounds good to me, Ray. Let's do it.
All right, guys, getting back into things. No turning back now. We're heading into another year of Georgia Championship Wrestling. We go back to January 1st. Take a look at a couple shows, actually, before they get to the Omni. Earlier in the day, Columbus, Georgia, Municipal Auditorium, Jimmy Garvin over French Angel, Frank Morrell, Terry Gordy battling Mr. Wrestling 2 to a draw. That could have been fun. Bob and Brad Armstrong, the National Tag Team Champions, over Buzz Sawyer and the Outlaw Ron Bass. Tommy Wildfire Rich defeating the Great Kabuki. Masked Superstar and partner Super D defeating Big Red and Leroy Brown in a no DQ match. And Jimmy Garvin scoring a win in a battle royal. So Jimmy Garvin, dual winner here in Columbus.
Yeah, this is Jimmy. For those who don't know, this is Jimmy Garvin before he was gorgeous.
Before he had the awesome porn stash, or at least not during this little period of his career anyway.
Yeah, but he had the perm going on, just not the full perm that we're going to love in about another 2 years.
Well, I think we ended 81. We started to see the beginnings of that 5 o'clock shadow on one Michael Hayes' face, and now Jimmy Garvin just needs to find his way with his manscaping as well.
So hey, now I just realized. Here's where the connection began. Georgia at the end of 81, 82. Imagine what those guys were doing at nighttime.
I don't even want to think about it. Well, actually, I kind of do, but we're just getting started with the episode, so I don't want to start there. Although many people probably wish we would. We continue on later that evening, though. We're off to the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia, and Jimmy Garvin back out again, kicking the show off this time, scoring a win over French Angel, Frank Morrell. Ron Bass defeating Jerry Oates. It's Kevin Sullivan over El Gran Apollo. Big Red coming to town, defeating Austin Idol Dolan. Wonder how much they paid him to do the job to Big Red. Stan Hansen battling Terry Gordy to a no contest. I wouldn't have it any other way. Buzz Sawyer defeating Mr. Wrestling 2 in a Texas death match. That was a return match from last time out. National Tag Team Champions, the Armstrongs over Terry and Dory Funk Jr. Dick Slater coming back to town, coming back from Southwest to defeat the Great Kabuki. It's Andre the Giant, who was scheduled to wrestle the Assassin, whomever that was under the mask, but instead the Assassin already gone from town. He worked one weekend of TV, and instead Ricky Harris, the future Black Bart, R.I.P., Andre over Ricky Harris here in the, semi-main position, and then it's Tommy Rich teaming with Leroy Brown to defeat the Masked Superstar and Super Destroyer in a Texas Tornado match at the end of the night. Talk about stacking a show, my God.
Oh, we spared no expense for this show. It was loaded. And when we get to TV, it's going to be loaded.
Oh, absolutely. I know. I just look at some of these matches, Hansen and Gordy, Buzz Sawyer in Wrestling 2, and, a lot of people call it at this point a throwaway match, a Texas death match. Armstrongs and Funk, Slater and Great Kabuki. And the reason a lot of people are going, what, they did this on a holiday. The holiday shows were the most lucrative at least for the Southern territories.
Yeah, I know how bad I wanted to watch both the Christmas show and the New Year's show, but back in 1981/82, there was just no capabilities of being able to do that.
Right. And since Ole's taken back over the book, we've seen very little from the Omni footage. We used to get it every week. We got to see, or every time the Omni cards would take place, we always got one, if not two or three highlight matches from the Omni shows. And since Ole's been back in charge of the book, that really hasn't been happening.
No, I think the last time we saw any Omni footage was when Kabuki blew the mist in Dusty Rhodes' eyes before that match with Ric Flair back in October. But that still didn't air until almost Thanksgiving.
Oh, man. Dusty's okay because Dusty saw green. He saw green with the mist, and he saw green when he got paid later that night as well, if you will. So went to the pay window, whether he had to wrestle or not, no doubt. The American Dream comes to town, he's going to get paid. So that's where we left off, the Omni, the first night of 1982, kicking things off hot with a stacked card. Now, I will say this. I've been kind of disappointed in the last couple months as far as the booking goes. Just like a huge lull has been going on. We had Kevin Von Erich and Superfly Snuka, and the Freebirds were getting pushed, and all these great things were going on at one time, and I guess we were spoiled, or at least I was spoiled. And so the last couple months have just kind of felt like a down area in the Georgia territory. Maybe that's just me, but everything's a roller coaster. It goes up and down, and I feel like we're getting ready to go back up.
I think that is more because the Freebirds weren't getting the big push. The Freebirds were WTBS at this time. Whether it was Gordy going against Hayes or just being together, the lack of Freebirds on the TV show, even with the injection of Roddy Piper, has just brought it down, a little bit.
Would you say that's Ole cutting off his nose despite his face, though? You guys are really driving me nuts. I'm not going to put you in the position to main event anymore. Meanwhile, you're costing yourself. I don't know what he's doing money-wise. Maybe it didn't really change the gates very much at all. But it just seems like an odd choice. I know we've talked about it a little bit in the past, but could they have been that? It's the Freebirds, so maybe the answer is yes. But could it have been that bad to the point where Ole says, fuck the money, I can't deal with these guys? Or is it just Ole being Ole, I think, at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think it's Ole being Ole because if he really didn't want him around, why didn't he let him go over 2 months ago?
Right.
Instead of just cutting back their time? Because they're still here.
You want to talk about cutting back time?
And
that's
now
definitely going to be
January,
right?
And they're still making appearances, but not getting any quote TV time, as we'll get to.
Yeah, definitely not. You talked about cutting back time. Absolutely. I mean, they find a way to get them on TV sometimes, but when they do, it's talk about trying to make something out of nothing. Michael Hayes, God bless him. We'll see that before the end of maybe this episode, or is it the episode after? We'll find out. We got to do 2 weeks of TV here, guys. We kick things off January 2nd, back to WTBS Studios, Atlanta, Georgia. The host is Gordon Solie and Rod Piper. Going to kick it off. Gordon bringing in Roddy, wishing everybody a happy and prosperous new year. But immediately they're interrupted by an upset Gary Hart, the manager extraordinaire. Gary apologizing for interrupting Piper, not Gordon, but he's pissed off that he has been banned from the upcoming event at the Omni. Gordon telling Gary Hart that they'll have time for him later in the program. Right now they have other things to get into, like the presentation of the brand new National Tag Team title belts. Well, Gary isn't happy about it, but reluctantly leaves. Meanwhile, Roddy Piper seems invested in Gary's story, and something tells me we will see Gary Hart again before the end of tonight.
Yeah, Gary was not happy at all, but Gordon, the real police officer of Georgia Championship Wrestling, put Gary in his place, and being their old buddies, Gary left out of respect. But also, Roddy Piper, you can see the love affair really getting ready to go to that next level between these two guys.
Yeah,
they've been very complimentary of each other up till now, and it's special between those two guys.
It is special, and we got a couple of love duos brewing here in the territory. Ole Anderson and Buzz Sawyer, we're going to see that too as time progresses, as scary as that is. So Roddy Piper and Gary Hart, Mutual Admiration Society. Once again, we left that in 1981, picks it right back up here at the beginning of 1982. So Gary Hart will be back later. He's complaining. Why was he booted from the Omni? Why can he not attend? Well, we'll talk about the real reason and the kayfabe reason as the show progresses. But right now we begin to hear the cheers of the fans, which means out comes the Armstrongs, Bob and Brad, and that means off goes the hot rod. Piper exits stage left even as the Armstrongs arrive to accept their newly made National Tag Team Championship belts. Nice and shiny. New year and new title belts. The leather not even bending yet to go around their waist. Going to have to break those things in, boys. But Bob Armstrong goes on record that he's seen Gary Hart get involved in the past, and he thinks it's justifiable that Hart be barred from the Omni at this upcoming event. Meanwhile, the Bullet also acknowledging the friendship between Gary Hart and Roddy Piper out here. He says, birds of a feather flock together, and those two are a pair of buzzards if he's ever seen them. Armstrong's going to exit. Roddy Piper returns, and he doesn't look too pleased.
Yeah, as a young teenager at this point, that line always stuck with me. The birds of a feather flock together. Because to be honest with you, up to that point, I really had never heard that before.
Oh, okay.
And that always stayed with me after that. And I always credited Bob Armstrong for implanting that in my head.
I love it. So that's old hat. Like that felt like an old timey saying when I was growing up back in the 80s. But yeah, birds of a feather. And of course, Bob going to add his little bulletism to it. They're a pair of buzzards if he's ever seen them. And that's Bob's way of saying that he's not a fan of Gary Hart nor Roddy Piper. They did this a lot back in Georgia. We didn't see this a lot in the other territories, but the guys would come out and promote the other feuds, the other talent, the other things going on in the territory. You know, we'll see that time and time again. They'll come out here and promote the entire card for the Omni, not just their own match. But Bullet out here, not feuding with Gary Hart at the moment, but he still had his input on what he thought about Gary being barred.
Yeah, Bob has input on everyone, as we'll find out.
As he should.
Good company man, that Bob Armstrong.
He sure is. And you called Gordon the policeman of Georgia Championship Wrestling, which may be true, but the kayfabe policeman of GCW is Bad Leroy Brown. He's out here to take on Marvin Turner. And the referee for hour number 1, Mr. Nick Patrick. As we see the crowd clapping and swaying, we hear the tune of Jim Croce's Bad Leroy Brown begin to play, and it is Leroy Brown making his way out to the ring, construction helmet and all. Marvin Turner going to try to match power with Leroy Brown, but that's just silly. Leroy done playing around, tossing Turner around like a rag doll, headbutts O'Plenty, and the big splash. Going to get the win there. Bad Leroy Brown, 2 minutes and 29 seconds. You know, recently I had a conversation with one of my sons who binge watched the Crockett stuff from the end of 1981 all the way into Great American Bash 1987 last summer on his time off of school. And when I was doing this and he saw Leroy Brown on the screen, he said, oh my God, that's before he comes to Crockett, or at least the time he saw him in 82 Crockett. And I said, you know what? I hadn't thought about it. You're right. Because Leroy Brown here is leaps and bounds better than what we're going to see, in my opinion, what we're going to see in Crockett when he's forced to dye his beard blonde and do the heel shtick and feud with Mike Rotunda, never ending every week on TV. So I like this incarnation of Leroy Brown better.
Yeah, I don't know why no other promotion ever jumped on this. And this is the only place he ever really got to be this version of Leroy Brown, because he was, feuding with the Junkyard Dog in Mid-South, and he was a heel with Humperdinck in Florida before he arrives here.
Right.
And then he goes back to being a heel in Mid-Atlantic. And then, of course, he ends up being part of the Zamboni Express. So we never got to see this version of Leroy Brown again. And this version was very highly entertaining. I love this version.
Yeah, it blew my mind when my son brought that point up, because I'm thinking in my head, boy, he was a lot better at the beginning of 82 than he is later than 82. But I guess it's just based on the way they're pushing him. As a heel, you got to be more slow and methodical. You can't get the crowd pumped with doing nonsensical dancing and things as you're running around the ring, hitting these guys and ping pong balling them. But he's fun here. I don't know that I want to go out there and watch him wrestle a 20-minute match, but he's certainly fun for TV. As we continue on, Buzz Sawyer out next, taking on Rick Thor. And of course, that means Ole Anderson's going to join commentary for this one to praise Sawyer's aggression and abilities. Buzz going to tie Thor up all over the mat, stiff shots in between, of course. Nice knee lift before he tosses Thor out to the floor. Although luckily he doesn't follow him out there. Back inside, Buzz continues to use that backbreaker, that ragdoll power slam move that he's been using the last several weeks. Drops an elbow across Thor's face for good measure, and Sawyer gets another win, 4 minutes and 39 seconds.
Yeah, now of course, Buzz was outstanding during this match. This is the beginning of the Buzz Sawyer Mad Dog 3-year run here, or 2-year run. This is the makings of that. Now, Ole added so much on the play-by-play with this one, where he talks about, Gene's injured. Gene's now a manager.
Right.
The NWA has said that he can go out and get another partner to defend the belts. And, he's looking at Mr. Buzz Sawyer. And another interesting name came up during that match. He said he was looking at one Terry Gordy as possible tag team partner.
Right. Yeah, those were the names they threw around.
So who knows where Ole's going to end up, who he's going to pick out as the partner. But, Buzz actually comes off as a very Anderson-like during his matches.
Oh, yeah, for as much of a piece of garbage as everybody tells the stories of what Buzz Sawyer was in the real world, I go back to his wrestling character, if there's much of a difference, and it was just amazing how natural he was when he came in. He's got it here. Maybe he needs a little tweak this or tweak that, especially with the promos and the character. But in the ring, I don't know that he needs a whole lot of training moving forward. Like, he's ready to go easily into that semi-main event slot already. He could easily work a world tag team title match along the likes of Ole Anderson. I can absolutely see that. And Ole, obviously, we talk about it quite a bit on the Bob Roop show. Ole just took a liking to Buzz Sawyer, one that Roop could never explain. And no matter what Buzz did, he kind of got away with it. So, and that, it's just beginning. This is the infancy, the blooming relationship between Ole and Buzz on air and behind the scenes. But you talked about, there's a promo after the matchup. Ole going to welcome Buzz over to Gordon Solie interview area. Gordon wondering if he's seeing a coalition formed between these two. Maybe not even a tag team, just some sort of a bond. Other than himself, Ole says he's never seen a man with such talent in the ring and handsome looks as well. But when the booker promoter backs you like this, you're doing okay, I'd say. The Sawyer train continues on is what I wrote here, as you can feel it coming, Jim. You can feel the push coming.
Oh, yeah, big time. And you have to love how Buzz still wants to be a pretty boy. He keeps moving that hand up there.
Doing that Doc Hendricks thing. Yeah, real handsome Doc. That's what he's...
Yeah, he's having a good time thinking he is God's gift to women. It's a shame we never got a Michael Hayes Buzz Sawyer feud over who was the better looking guy.
They could have battled for the initials PS. That would have been something else. Absolutely. I don't know that Michael Hayes wanted to step in the ring with Buzz Sawyer, but it's another story for another day. We continue on back to the ring. It's Paul Jones taking on a newcomer by the name of Jim Verderoso. Verderoso, apparently a powerlifter out of Rome, Georgia, according to Gordon Solie. I don't know. There's something familiar about this guy, though. If you take away that hair, I do believe, yes, indeed, Jim Verderoso, a.k.a. the future, not too far future, Arn Anderson.
Yeah, within another year, he will be Arn Anderson. Actually, it'll be Marty Lundy first, and then he becomes Arn Anderson.
And for those who don't know, Marty Lundy, his real name, but it's peculiar to me how they chose the name Verderoso. That's not a common last name. And Arn's done so many podcasts. He's probably explained it or at least said, I have no idea where it came from. So I guess I can cite Arn's podcast to go back and check it out for yourself. That's one thing I did not dig into to figure out where they came up with that name. But it's kind of funny. You pointed out Tony Zane, who's going by a different name right now. And I think we're going to see Tony, at least on this episode of TV, as Tony Valentino in a moment. But I know him and Arn broke in together. So it was not a shocker to me to see that, well, if Tony Zane's here and I just saw Arn Anderson, well, now I can put two and two together. It all makes sense. These guys both come up from Rome and they both get an opportunity at the same time. And
they're very respectable in the ring. They're not your normal guys that are going to get marrying Crumleys of the world. They don't know what in the world they're doing in the ring. And get squashed, or a Frankie Williams type, WWF squash guy. Both guys can would get their offense in, and that's the one thing about Georgia. It was very rarely ever a straight squash match. The enhancement town always got a little bit of offense in,
and some of the heels gave more than others.
Most part.
Yeah, Superstar is big to give people some offense in as well, which is he doesn't have to. He's a main eventer, but even he does it quite a bit. But. So we got Paul Jones in here, who was not a normal Georgia mainstay. He's been coming down from the Crockett country lately, a babyface up there. And it's kind of funny to see Ole out there just before this promoting Buzz Sawyer as a potential partner when we have the future Arn Anderson in the very next match, but still green and very early in his career. Arn still, as I was watching this, he does things that you just don't see from many rookies. Now, admittedly, there's some awkwardness in some of the movement, but scooting himself to the ropes after taking a bump and the way he backed off from rope breaks. when he got the Paul Jones up against the ropes. There was just natural awareness of where he was and what to do. Things you can't really teach. They have to see it for themselves and kind of mimic it and learn why they're doing it. Just, I wrote here in my notes, a diamond in the rough for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And, in the same vein, even though he never got the big push, Tony Zane, they're kind of interchangeable at this point, or Tony Valentino. Both of them could work very well. And they did what they had to do perfectly, in my opinion.
No, I totally agree. So Paul Jones in here, hothead Paul Jones, still a babyface though, because that's what he is up in the Carolinas. And so that's what he's got to do here as well on cable TV. Excellent selling by Arn here on the punches and the counters in the ring. Great bumping too for Paul Jones, his leg dive tackles. You don't see a lot of guys take that properly, where the guy comes at you and dives at your thigh area for the tackle and you take that flip bump. Arn took them perfectly here. And for the beginning of 1982, there weren't a whole lot of guys doing that move. Certainly not a whole lot of guys understanding how to take that move. And Arn, just amazing. And that's going to set up the Indian Deathlock, Paul Jones' famous finishing hold. Going to get the submission win, 5 minutes and 1 second. Now, I didn't live in the Paul Jones peak push era of the 1970s, so I think I've said this before, but I just don't get it. Fundamentally sound in the ring, a veteran for sure, and he's been on top. I'm not knocking him, but just, at least by this point in his career, very bland. And I've seen both Mid-Atlantic and Georgia, and it just doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, the only time I ever saw Paul Jones really get any kind of a babyface push was in Florida when he was Mr. Florida.
Mr. Florida.
The Super Destroyer burned a cigar.
Yes.
Him and Oliver Humperdinck burned out Mr. Florida's eye. So that was really the only time I ever got to see Paul Jones in a babyface role. And I didn't even know it was Paul Jones at the time. I didn't find out till years later, kind of got smart. That's who that was.
Well, thanks to a few people out there who recorded random Mr. Florida segments. There's a little bit of that out there. If you guys can find it on YouTube, check it out. I did enjoy that character. He seemed a little more hot-headed in regards to just fiery, really. And so if that was Paul Jones in his peak, then I could see why more fans were big on him. But here in the 1980s, not so much, at least not for me. And then I think about his manager run and woof, that's a whole nother story for a whole nother podcast. But right now, the Armstrongs back out to talk Georgia Championship Wrestling on tour in 1982. The Bullet, he has Kabuki tonight in Augusta, but also they're making their way to the new towns. Up in Ohio, it's Dayton, Canton, and Zanesville. Then it's down to Ashland, Kentucky, and over to Charleston, West Virginia. So this is it right out of the gate. The beginning of the year, Ole says, we're branching out. Now, they've been doing Columbus, Jamie, for a little over a year now. But now all at once, it's not one more city, it's Dayton, Canton, Zanesville. Eventually we're going to see Cleveland and other cities fall in place. And then Ashland, Kentucky, Charleston, West Virginia. We know they've been doing West Virginia. They're going to pick up a few more towns there as well. And
these were all part of the Sheik's towns, right? Before he went dark there in the beginning of 80. That's why they were able to jump into these towns.
Well, being from up here, that's what really bothers me. People talk about these being the Sheik's towns up here. Now, Sheik did take over towns after the NWF and Johnny Powers and all those guys faded out, but I would never say that Sheik owned those towns. Now, he did run there, and I'm not saying he didn't, and we could call that owning the towns. But to say that up until 1980, Sheik wasn't running a full-time territory before the 70s even folded or ended. So to say he owned these towns in the 80s is silly. And Ole talked about it in his book. I think we covered it on the Bob Roop show when Ole started running, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Ole said in his book, when he started running Michigan or Ohio, he went to Sheik first just so there was no bullshit. And he said, hey, man, do you want to do a partnership? You'll make X amount of percent. We'll make X amount of percent. And the Sheik said, no, this is my area. So Ole ran it anyway.
Right, exactly.
Meanwhile, I should point out, Ole was, the Sheik had no interest in actually running shows in those towns. He just didn't want anybody else to do it either.
Yeah, right. He just put that underneath his umbrella. And if he wanted to go there, he did. And if he didn't, he didn't.
Yeah. And it's really sad is he didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to book. He didn't have to run the show. He didn't have to provide talent. And I use that term loosely based on what was left in the big time promotion by this point in time. But at the same time, he still didn't want to take a piece of the pie. I mean, it was being offered to him, but Sheik trying to keep it real, I guess, here in 1982. We'll see how that works out for him. But we move on. We talk about the next upcoming Omni card, January 17th. We're going to get to that on the next time. Jamie, we're here on Regional Wrestling, but some of the matches already announced include Dusty Rhodes coming back for revenge, taking on the Great Kabuki. Now, you mentioned it. Gary Hart barred from ringside after what happened the last time out, Kabuki blinding Dusty with that mist. back near the end of last year. Also at the Omni on the 17th, the Armstrongs will take on Terry Gordy and Ron Bass, titles on the line. Masked Superstar going one-on-one perhaps for the final time with Wildfire Tommy Rich inside a steel cage. And that brings out the Wildfire, who is fired up for the steel cage match, and all of the new towns are coming. So Wildfire Tommy Rich expanding into the north, but at the same time, we've got some pretty big Omni matches upcoming.
Yeah, they sure pushed it as it was going to be the finale to the feud.
Right.
Because they kept harping on, it started in a cage where Mephisto and Ray Stevens all attacked Tommy in a cage and leave him a bloody mess. And now it's going to end in a cage. But the interesting part here was not only did they do the interview for the Omni, they also kind of backed out of that and went to another interview with the Superstar or Tommy Rich. And they were just talking about in general how it was going to be in the cage. So they must be considering taking that cage match on tour.
Well, that's a good call, and I could see them doing that at least in some of the bigger towns, for certain, like a Columbus, Ohio, or something of that nature. I could see them doing that because that's a money match. You know, that's something you do want to take on tour, so to speak. And, you know, it did start in a cage. They played it here on TV. We saw Super D come in and replace Superstar, steal the title, win it for the Masked Superstar, Tommy Rich losing the belt at that point in time. And so now revenge on the mind of the Wildfire and retribution, no doubt, but at the same time, Superstar looking to be the superstar, if you will. We continue on with Cowboy Ron Bass taking on Tony Valentino, a.k.a. Tony Zane. Now, Ole must have loved the name Valentino because the minute the enhancement talent named Vinny Valentino left, Tony Valentino arrived. And we're actually going to see Vinny before we're done here on this podcast. But right now, Tony Zane out here taking on Ron Bass, and apparently we have time to kill. So Ron Bass just works over Zane's arm for seemingly ever, which will make sense if he ends this thing with an arm lock of some form. I mean, it's a great job of just rendering a body part useless, the way Bass picks apart Zane's arm here. We get about 6 minutes of that, Jamie, and then Ron just pivots, starts punching and kicking, delivering that power slam, the Texas Stampede, stealing the name from Bill Watts and the Oklahoma Stampede. Very clever there, Ron, getting the win. 7 minutes, 37 seconds. I did not need that in my life.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ray. I fell asleep. Ron Bass comes on the screen, and I just totally get this as interested. Well, not until like 1985, 86, Ron Bass, did I finally, kind of get behind him. Even when I saw him in Florida, he just boring to me. We all have different tastes, and Ron Bass wasn't mine.
No, yeah, it's, I wasn't a fan growing up. Going back and doing the Grenade, though, I have a lot more respect for Ron. He's not as bad as I remember him being in the WWF, and that's just a fact. But again, he was never utilized or used to any major level until the Brutus Beefcake feud, which has just gone on long enough at this point. Ron's got about 2 months left on the Grenade show, going to close out, getting a haircut in January of 89. Spoiler alert, guys, for anybody listening to the Grenade project. But Ron Bass here back in 1982, scoring a win over Tony Zane. 6 minutes of arm work. Actually, it wasn't that bad. If this was an Anderson match, I know what was coming, and I'd say, well, that's an Ole Anderson match. But it was Ron Bass just beating the living. I would have not expected to see Zane back out here the way he beat the crap, just rendered him useless of that left arm. But unfortunately, he decides, okay, now that I've really roughed you up, I'm just going to give you a power slam to take it home. But that's psychology for you, I suppose, with some guys. As we continue on, you want to talk about a master of psychology, a couple of them, actually. Roddy Piper is going to go walk over to ringside and interview Gary Hart. So the Mutual Admiration Society continues. It started, like I said, back at the end of 1981, stays strong into the new year. Roddy upset for Gary. He's insulted for Gary Hart. The NWA taking away Kabuki's communication piece. That makes sense. Kabuki from the Singapore. And of course, Gary Hart, he apparently speaks the language. He can communicate and tell Kabuki what to do. But with Gary not there at ringside, I don't know if that means more danger for Kabuki's opponent. He doesn't really have anybody to calm him down, if you will.
Right, exactly. Because we've seen time and time again where Kabuki decides to go off on his opponent, even, with those Kabuki swords that he has carried into the ring several times, where Gary Hart has to come in and, calm Kabuki down. Will Roddy Piper be able to help with this?
Well, Gary says that it's just wrong. That's what's wrong with America today. The whiny fans, they get their way. Boy, if he only knew. Georgians hate Asians, Gary Hart will have us know. Amazing. Bill Watts hates Russia, and Georgians apparently hate Asians. at least according to Gary Hart. Roddy Piper, being from Scotland, is not an American, he points out. Thus, he understands where Gary's coming from. Well, these two devious minds have come together and concocted a way to work around the ruling of Gary Hart's ban. It appears Roddy Piper himself will step in to replace Hart to work as the manager of the Great Kabuki at the Omni. Gary only asks one thing, that Roddy play the bagpipes for Kabuki's entrance.
I would have paid anything to actually see if that happened. What a way to introduce Roddy Piper to the Omni. He's been here since Halloween, and he's not made one Omni appearance yet. So this will be his Omni debut, and you still don't have him in the ring.
Right.
You're going to have him outside the ring as a manager.
Yeah, that's slow build, and I'm glad you pointed that out because I didn't even think of that. I know Roddy hasn't worked here in Georgia yet. He's been working up in Crockett land, but he's been here on TV every week, almost every week since Halloween. And you're right, he has not appeared that I can think of at an Omni card for any reason. And again, he's still not wrestling. They're slowly building that Roddy Piper wrestler deal here in Georgia, even though they acknowledge the fact that he is a wrestler in other territories. Not so much here in Georgia, just an announcer at this point. And man, I just killed to see him play Kabuki to the ring. Kabuki entering the ring to bagpipe music, just amazing. Apparently Kabuki a fan of bagpipes, Jamie.
That would be great. And I can believe Kabuki likes bagpipes.
Sure, why not? I could only see Vince McMahon, if he had gotten his hands on footage of that. Boy, Kabuki would have had a job and Piper would have been screwed going into the mid-'80s. I'll tell you that, because that's something Vince would have loved to have had. So up next, we talked about it at the top of the show, clean-shaven, and I wrote that in my notes, clean-shaven Jim Garvin taking on Ed Timms. Most of the matchup, Garvin riding Timms on the mat, working the arm, then it's a nasty running forearm shot, kind of like the pounce, the old pounce back in TNA. Jimmy Garvin coming off from the side, pouncing poor Ed Timms with a forearm to the side of the jaw, and I mean, these forearms are landing every week. Match goes 4 minutes and 12 seconds, but the wheels just spinning in place for Jimmy Garvin, but they do nothing with him. Every week he's scoring wins on TV. It appears he's getting some wins on the undercard matches on these house shows, but just not really doing much of anything else with them. Just kind of weird.
Yeah, he's got the Brian Blair push going on right now.
Well, I wouldn't put him down much.
When Blair was in for September, October, November.
Couple months, right?
Yeah, he was getting the TV victories.
Yep.
And some victories on the house shows.
Just very peculiar. Jimmy Garvin being used as a face, wrestling pretty aggressively, and then that finisher just does not sound like it does not look like a face move at all. Those are some serious forearm shots, guys. I'm telling you, go watch a couple of these from this era. Jimmy Garvin just knocking people. It's like Lex Luger without the steel gimmick and the elbow gimmick, but it's crazy stuff. Jimmy Garvin sticking around here for a little bit as we continue on. We get an interview from the Masked Superstar and the Super Destroyer. Superstar talking the big cage match on January 17th against Tommy Rich. Says, as you pointed out, it's all going to end. If you want something done, you got to do it yourself. Superstar alluding to all of the bounties, the bounty hunters that have come in, that he offered the money to take out Tommy Rich. Well, if you're going to do something right, you got to do it yourself. We also hear from Ron Bass at this point. He says he saw the new tag team belts given to the Armstrongs. He's going to go out and find himself a partner coming up for the Omni. And I wrote in my notes, I guess the Outlaw didn't get the memo. His partner was Terry Gordy. They announced it several segments back.
Yeah, this isn't the first time that quality control hasn't been very tight on the upcoming Omni matches, and they forget to tell the wrestlers who they're
isn't that crazy?
Teaming up with or who they're wrestling. Almost as if that was added in post-editing, the insertion of the upcoming card.
If that's not a tell, Jamie, as to who's going to win the matchup, though, right? Like, this dude doesn't know who his partner is yet, but they've already announced his partner. I mean, I understand as marks or as kids or as whatever, back in the day, maybe we wouldn't have been able to put two and two together, but now watching this now with 2025 eyes, I go, yeah, these guys have a chance of winning the belts.
Exactly. Even I was smart enough to realize that they probably weren't going to win the belts.
But it's just funny. That's Ole booking. He's giving them the sheet. He's having them read the matches there on TV. And it's Ron Bass sitting backstage, not paying attention. And he comes out and he says, I'm going to go find myself a partner. And apparently it was going to be Terry Gordy. Somebody better alert the Outlaw. As we continue on tag team action, Masked Superstar and Super D taking on Mike Jackson and Josh Stroud. as the superstar, this is really weird, gets happy birthday greetings from the crowd. Happy birthday being sang to the masked superstar. I wrote, what the fuck? So you know what? I had to do that digging. Bill Eadie's birthday was actually December 27th. So they weren't that far off. Belated by a few days, but kind of eerie. Why would these fans know that it's the superstar's birthday?
Maybe one of Bill's family members was in the audience and decided to play a practical joke on him and said to other people, hey, you know what? It's Superstar's birthday, I heard.
That's it was very peculiar.
Yeah, it was funny. I didn't remember that from back in the day, but I was laughing pretty hard when I saw it on the rewatch.
That was new to me, but we step in the ring tag team action. The well-put-together Stroud tries to counter holds early on, and it works briefly, but he doesn't seem to know what to do next. So he's countering the holds. They're giving him a shot to do something, and he just doesn't have the experience to follow up. Mike Jackson going to tag in, though, and he does know what to do in there. So Super D a little more cautious with that lightning quick Mike, who outquicks the masked pair and frustrates them, sliding out of moves and crossbody on Superstar from Mike Jackson. Drop kicks for both of the masked men, but he goes to the well once too many times. Super D going to dodge a second drop kick and drops Jackson then across the top rope. Tag back to the Superstar, who hits that sit-out clothesline. The masked tandem go over 4 minutes and 46 seconds.
You know, what's interesting here, I believe we talked about it in 1981, that when Mike Jackson was in tag matches, he never did the honors. And yet he was doing the honors in this match. I believe we discussed that.
I can't say. I'd have to go back. If we did, I don't recall. We've talked so much about everything, and it's been a bit as well. But I'd be curious to go back and check and see if that's true, because if anything, I would want Mike Jackson to be doing the job, not because he's not as good as his partner, but because he can make these moves look a whole lot better. He's just that good in that role. And so, but here he made it look good. He came in, he got, they gave him some offense briefly, although, whenever they give him time in there, he knows how to shine. He knows how to get over fun before doing the job. It was always fun to watch a Mike Jackson match. We just talked about that as well with Bob Roop recently, but we continue on. We get an interview to close out hour number 1 with Leroy Brown and partner Big Red. Brown talking Buzz Sawyer jumping him at the last Omni card. He says he doesn't get mad, he gets even. Then Big Red going to talk about Super D and Superstar, and people be asking, hey, Red, why you smile the way you do? Well, he says he was in a wheelchair the first 5 years of his life, and God blessed him to do the things he do now. First 5 years? Were there no baby carriers? I mean, he was in a wheelchair. It's very peculiar. Then again, who's going to carry a baby Big Red? Was he even Little Red? I mean, was he always Big Red? I'd have to think maybe.
Right, exactly. When he came out, he was too big for a bassinet or anything.
I don't even want to think about that.
He was already sleeping in the king bed and right to the wheelchair. He wasn't going into the stroller.
That makes me want to.
And strollers weren't that advanced back then.
No, that's true. I want to do a deep dive back into Jerry Reese's life, aka Big Red, and I can't see him making that up. It's very random to make something like that up. So I'm curious. It makes me want to deep dive into his world and what happened. And if that is true, God bless. Like he said, God blessed him to do the things he does now, and certainly after, the first 5 years of your life, you slowly, walk and continue. But, if that's a bullshit story, then shame on him. But if that's true, then good for Big Red out here making the best of it on cable TV. And we end hour number 1. Got to be happy, Jamie, that college football season over, as it's bowl game time now.
Thank God Bob Neal's gone for now.
For now. As we continue on, picking up hour number 2 where we left off, it's Gordon Soley, Roddy Piper, still the hosts. And then to the ring? No, it's another interview, this time with Jimmy Garvin and Dick Slater here. Slater says it's good to see Jim Garvin. They go a long way, all the way back to Florida. Dickie tells the story about two men who think they're tough, but there's the old adage about a tough man walking down the street, somebody coming up behind him with a baseball bat. Then we'll see how tough they really are. Never heard that adage before, Jamie, but yep, that sounds like Dick Slater.
That sounds like something Bob Roop might have told to Dick Slater.
It's just funny. It's a classic Dick Slater, and he's a baby face, mind you guys. As we go to the ring to watch singles action, the Gimpy, or he should have been anyway, the Tony Valentino back out here after that 6 minutes of arm beatdown from Ron Bass earlier. This time, Valentino's opponent is Dick Slater. So surprised to see Tony Zane still has his left arm attached to his body, but Slater's going to take care of that, likely. Actually, he's pretty basic here. Atomic drop, back suplex combo, giving Slater the relatively quick win for TBS. Match goes 3 minutes, 13 seconds. And I should mention, referee for hour number 2, Scrappy McGowan.
And what in the world did Valentino do wrong to get these two guys in one Saturday morning TV taping?
Yeah. What you going to do? I mean, it could have been worse. Could have been Buzz Sawyer, right? I mean, he could have had Buzz. So
very true.
Yeah. So he should be counting his blessings. You know who does get Buzz Sawyer in the next matchup? It's Mike Jackson. You want to talk speed and agility to start. These two guys can move. Roddy Piper and Ole Anderson going to join commentary for this one, as Buzz pretty respectful of Mike Jackson's ability early on, but eventually lays in those nasty forearms across the jaw. And as nasty as Buzz's groundwork is, Ole wants even more aggression. Fucking crisscross spot to Sawyer landing that Mad Dog power slam. Mid-run, I wrote, fuck. Now, let me explain this to you guys. Jamie, you know what the Mad Dog power slam is. The guy's hitting, Mad Dog's running, and he's catching the guy. They do the leapfrog, and he catches him in midair, turns it into a power slam. This was a little different. This was an early inception, and this is maybe even more impressive because we're doing a crisscross spot. Both guys are moving across the ring, and they meet center ring, and somehow Buzz stops full momentum, 20 miles an hour, just puts on his brakes and turns it into a power slam. Just absolutely amazing agility and power as Buzz Sawyer going over on Mike Jackson, 6 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's a shame he was the person he was.
Yeah.
Because what a talent he was in the ring.
I can't tell you how many times I thought
stuff like that.
When I was covering UWF with Roman Gomez. Every time I saw Buzz do something amazing, that was the first thing that came to my mind. It's unfortunate that he was the person that he was because, my God, endless talent in that ring.
I mean, he still had the talent in late 89, early 90 when he went into WCW. He was still, just a machine in there.
Yeah, until he, what did he do, break his arm or something like that? One match?
I believe that's what it was.
Yeah. I don't want to take away from Dick Slater, too. He just had that squash match. Now, Dickie going to go back to the Omni. We talked about it already. He's part of the lineup. He just came out of the last Omni card. I think he's on the next one. We'll have to wait and see now. I can't remember. But Slater has been booking at this point in time down in San Antonio for Joe Blanchard. So he's getting the call up, and he's popping up when time permits. And that's why we see him on TV, but not on the house shows.
House shows for now.
Right. Well, from there, we hear from the Armstrongs yet again, as even Bob Armstrong knows Ron Bass's partner is Terry Gordy. Everyone but the Outlaw apparently knows, it would seem. Also, Mr. Wrestling 2 Out says he's going to be teaming with Tommy Rich a lot on the tour of Ohio. Well, we'll have to look at the results and see about that. Remember, Wrestling 2 was the reason they started coming to Columbus. The fans were asked, the fans in the higher level cities of cable TV were asked who their favorite wrestler was. And they got a surprising amount of postcards from Columbus in that area of Ohio down to Georgia. And they said, oh my God, not only is Mr. Wrestling 2 getting over, but our promotion is being watched. That's why they started going to Columbus. And it all started with Mr. Wrestling 2.
Right. Mr. Wrestling 2, Bill Watts, Ole and Gene owned a part of that town. And the rest is history. They continue going through the rest of Ohio now.
Yeah, and it makes total sense with Wrestling 2 being over with that Ohio crowd to team him with the man, Wildfire Tommy Rich, at this point here in Georgia Championship Wrestling, especially up north. We're not seeing that down here in the South so much, but up north it makes sense. As we continue on, another interview from Leroy Brown and Big Red talking Superstar and Super D. Red says they gonna do it the way it's supposed to be did, Jamie. They gonna get it right.
Look how great Leroy Brown and Big Red are here. I should have put the NWA World Tag Team.
Oh, man, I'm not going to.
At least for a short term in Georgia. They never had to go to the Mid-Atlantic to defend them. But they could have did a good 2-week title change here, and the people would have ate it up.
Well, you almost talked me into it when you said that just for a short term. I was like, yeah, they could win him in the Omni, drop him in Columbus, Ohio the next day. But in the 2 weeks, I don't know about that. I mean, I'm fine with them as a team. They're fun on TV, but I cannot watch them wrestle Superstar and Super D. That's like an ultimate turnoff for me. And I'm sure it was okay, but I don't know. Just talk about clash of styles. Everybody's a clash of styles when it comes to Leroy Brown and Big Red in the ring. But man, look what's up next here. Stan Hansen in the studio, taking on Marvin Turner. Rough and tumble. That's his style. Turner going to pull Stan's hair to grab an armbar. Might regret that, Marvin. Yep. Turner whips Stan into the corner, but Hansen bounces out, big back elbow to the face, followed up by the lariat. Going to end things in about 3 minutes time. Good to see the bad man from Borger back on TBS TV.
And what talent we are seeing on this show so far.
Yes.
And now you just add Stan Hansen to the mix. It wasn't a good day for enhancement talent physically. Let's put it that way. But poor Marvin. He put in there against Stan Hansen. Stan Hansen on the day after New Year's.
Hey, it took balls to pull Stan's hair. That's all I got to say. That's all I can say. That's all I got, man. After the win, we hear from Stan Hansen and Tommy Rich together. Last year, everybody was out here. They've been trying to take Tommy Rich out, as we know. Nobody has been here to watch his back, but Hansen, he says he's here now. So the superstar, Super D, Ole Buzz Sawyer, bring it on, brother, says the Wildfire. And then, as you pointed out earlier, they used that line. It all started in a cage, and it's going to end in a cage. Superstar Tommy Rich and the superstar January 17th inside the steel cage. Feels like we're in for a reset period. Lots of people jumbled together here. Lots of mentioning of 4 and 5 and 6 guys that potential feuds.
Yeah, they're setting up things very nicely. And as we're going to find out in this next match, the whole show is just loaded. Some guys are leaving. Some guys are arriving. Some guys, the last time we were together, said that they were going to be in Georgia all year long. Well, I'll just have to wait to find out whether they will be.
Yeah, some guys coming, some guys going, some guys just stopping by. But right now, we head to the ring to see 2 former NWA World Heavyweight Champions, the only brother duo to get it done, Terry and Dory Funk Jr., taking on Grand Apollo and Tommy Rogers, which could make for a fun team. But again, they're in there with 2 former world champs. Tommy Rogers draws the short straw, winds up getting picked first and picked apart first as well. Double underhook suplex from Dory, going to get a 2 count. Couple of botches, miscommunications from the young Tommy Rogers in there. And Dory pops him a good forearm for his troubles. Tommy finally able to make that tag out to Grand Apollo, who fires up on Dory Funk. Drop kicks on both of the Funks, but a tag back to Rogers. Tommy with a pair of slams on both Funks. But Rogers, though, runs into a Terry Funk knee in the corner, and it's time to work over the leg of one Tommy Rogers. The spinning toe hold going to get it done, as it always does, for the Funk brothers, scoring the win, 3 minutes, 48 seconds, and they get it done right by the ropes, too. Roddy Piper on commentary pointing out ring awareness is key. Look where you are, Tommy. Tommy Rogers at any point could have reached up and grabbed that rope. Now, it wasn't in the scripts, guys, obviously, but at the same time, Roddy Piper, making sense. Ring awareness. Look where you are. You could have escaped that move.
Yeah, this is one of the better Roddy Piper episodes for him doing his color commentary.
Yeah.
Because, he's right. Yes, of course, he's a heel. But he's right down the middle and mentioning little things like this. The minutia that Roddy Piper would point out was great. Not that Gordon is Gordon and even Roddy Piper loved Gordon. But Piper, from being in the ring, had so much more to add. And they really picked the right guy to do it in Roddy Piper.
Obviously later we'll see Jesse Ventura work with Vince and the WWF and Gorilla on the pay-per-views. And a lot of people might think, well, that was Roddy Piper's shtick here in Georgia and even Mid-Atlantic with Bob Caudle at points and times. But that's not what Piper did. Yes, he was a heel, and yes, eventually it's going to escalate into a lot more comments, negative comments and things from the Hot Rod. But if you pay attention here, he does a couple of things really well as a wrestler. He gets over some of the enhancement talent. He makes them sound more credible than maybe they are, or makes you pay attention and makes you believe that these guys are just tough just by appearing in the ring with some of the big names here. But he also covers a lot of mistakes, botches, or something as similar as this, because he's thinking, Bill Watts used to do this a lot. Think about what the fans would say at home if they were calling bullshit, that this is fake. Why didn't he grab the rope? Roddy explaining it so that when we go to ask it to ourselves at home, it already makes sense. Ring awareness.
Yes, that's exactly what he did all the time. Roddy was outstanding. I mean, as time goes on, Roddy does get more heelish, but at least since, Halloween, he has been perfect. And I highly recommend anyone who hasn't really watched any of these Georgia shows, you got to watch it just for Roddy alone.
And I've been adding all of the Georgia shows. I should have pointed that out at the top of the show. For those who don't know, we have a ton of the 1981 episodes of Georgia Championship Wrestling up right now at youtube.com/wrestling grenade. I've begun adding The 1982 episodes now, and the first 2 episodes that we're covering today are up. You can go check those out right now, as well as a very cool Andre the Giant Strong Kobayashi match, which has over 50,000 views in less than a week already. It's amazing to watch Andre back in 72 just work a headlock. My God, the guy was just amazing in the ring. But that's another story for the Pro Wrestling Academy podcast, I believe. So we'll continue on here. Georgia, 1982, and, well, familiar music hits. Freebird, I do believe, which means Michael Hayes out. Now rocking that beard, Jamie, the one he will wear for the remainder of his Michael Hayes career anyway. So he's got music, and he can use it. And if you don't like it, you can get the fuck out of his face. 10-second plug for the Northern Tour. Even the basic fan had to be wondering, why is this guy no longer a focal point in the promotion? No airtime. Literally playing Freebird so that Michael Hayes could come out and count the time, guys. 10 seconds on the air. Now, he makes as quick uses of it as he can, because if you give Michael Hayes 10 seconds, he's going to take it. But, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, it's right in front of your face. Like, how did this guy go from being involved in every main angle and getting all the TV time in the world, talking about Frumpy and his little brother and the baseball and all this shit, and now this guy gets 10 seconds to go, hey, I'm coming to your town?
Well, at least he got 10 seconds.
It could have been worse, I suppose. Yeah, he could have got no TV time at all.
We haven't seen Terry Gordy forever.
What's more insulting, not being booked for TV or being booked to come in and talk for 10 seconds? I have to wonder. Michael's not here for me to ask him. He's, over there working for the WWE, so I don't know what his answer would be, but very curious, like how he felt about this. Obviously, he's being run out of the company is what's happening at this point, and that's going to happen here fairly shortly. But it's just weird to see Michael Hayes getting 10-second promo. That's what they give to wrestling too, and he's got nothing going on, but it is what it is. In fact, I don't think Hayes was on the last Omni card. Come to think of it, he might not be on the next one. But we continue on. We hear from the Outlaw Ron Bass, who gets more TV time than Michael Hayes, even though he doesn't even know his match at the Omni when everybody else does. But apparently he has another match in the ring as well. So 2 matches from Ron Bass. Goody. And his opponent, Jim Verderoso, returns for hour 2, a.k.a. Arn Anderson. Boy, the Texas hour, it would appear. We saw Stan Hansen. We saw the Funks. And now we see Ron Bass back out here. Rough go for the future AA in this one. Bass in total control. Arn does show some guts, though. About 5 minutes into the beating, he finally fires off some shots. Still has something in the tank out there, but the Outlaw got to cut him off, and the Texas Stampede getting the win, 5:45. Arn much more impressive in the first hour than in hour number 2 here, but then again, he's wrestling Ron Bass.
Yeah, it's the only reason I watched the match, because I knew it was Arn involved in it.
I was curious to see how much he would get here, and Ron Bass didn't give him a whole lot, but I get it. He doesn't know what Arn's going to go on to do, and Ron is getting himself over. And that's pretty much what they were designed to go out there and do. And Ron Bass picks up yet another victory. How over he got, that's debatable. We continue on. We learn the Masked Superstar has changed his clothes. He was just out here in hour 1 wearing something completely different. But now back out, changed it up, and his mask as well. He says, screw the tour. Masked Superstar only concerned about the steel cage on the 17th. A cage has no friends. He expects to get hurt, but so will Tommy Rich. So Superstar stating, Gordon wanting to do what he always does, talk about all the upcoming matches in all the towns. Superstar says there's only one town I'm concerned with, as he should be. That's a huge matchup.
Huge, as I've heard said. But yeah, a gigantic matchup. It's the Buzz Sawyer, Tommy Rich feud 2 years earlier.
Well, we heard from the
It's
Superstar.
come to the end in the cage.
It is. That's what they say. We'll have to wait and see. They've been feuding since the summer, so we'll see where this goes up next. Is Tommy Rich going to respond to the Superstar, talking about coming to Ohio later this week? But back to the Omni on January 17th. Again, it's a repeat, basically, of what Tommy said earlier. It started in the cage in Augusta. It's going to end in a cage in Atlanta. Is Tommy Rich and the Superstar on a collision course for one final night. And it's coming up at the Omni, guys. As we continue on tag team action, going to see Big Red and Leroy Brown in the ring, taking on Ricky Harris and Ed Timms. We've got so many fans in the studio. I actually see some sitting on the floor during this entrance. Good old studio wrestling.
Well, it's just a good thing that neither Big Red or Leroy Brown fell out of the ring on top of him.
Well, well, that's true that. Talk about a lawsuit like Stone Cold Steve Austin and the old ATV at WrestleMania, right? So Big Red tumbling on you. I don't think you get paid the same as you would from WWE. But now, if this is an arena, you could argue, wow, they're packing them in. They can't get enough seats for the people trying to get in. But these tickets are free, guys, so they could have easily closed it off to these fans. But they let a few extra in, and they're actually sitting here, what we called in my day Indian style. But I was told years ago that that's no longer acceptable. It's crisscross applesauce now, and I refuse to say that.
Wow, I had not heard that one yet. But you have the youngsters. I don't.
That's right. The first time I heard that, I'm like, what? But yeah, actually, there was a lot more words that followed the word what, but we'll just keep it clean for now. As we continue on, the heels, I guess we'll call them the heels here, trying to attack Big Red and Leroy Brown, but are quickly disposed of, sent out to the floor. Ricky Harris back in, big boy himself, let's not forget that, but completely outsized by his two opponents here. Now, Ed Tim's also a big dude, fares even worse than Ricky Harris does in the ring. Leroy scooping up both opponents with ease throughout the matchup. Very impressive, because yes, Leroy's a big guy, but Black Bart was a pretty big dude, and Ed Harris, he's got some weight on him too.
And it's surprising that he's out here doing enhancement work when he wrestled Andre the Giant the day before. You'd think he'd be, a little sore, because that match had to end with him getting splashed by Andre.
Right. Oh, man. Absolutely. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, he just worked Andre the Giant, and now he's out here working these guys. He should be ready for this, you would think. But, man, Big Red bringing whole new meaning to the word butt. Eat your heart out, Iceman Parsons. Big Red with a butt. Now, he didn't leave his feet, but it worked. Taking down Ed Timms. Leroy Brown with a giant backdrop on Ricky Harris leads to a four-way melee, and the asshole camera director missing the Holy Ghost splash from Red on Timms. Going to give the baby faces the win in just 4 minutes time. We didn't even get to see the splash, the finish of the matchup. Like, where are you cutting to? We're in a fucking studio, dude. Anyways, they stuck two of their larger enhancement guys in here, and they were still small for Leroy Brown and Big Red.
That's a lot of meat in there.
Yeah, that whole meaty men meeting pounding meat thing that you do over there on the other ship deal.
Meaty men slapping meat.
There it
that's
is.
One of our,
you got it right this time.
Yeah, I got it right. I got it wrong last time. Anybody that's heard the last episode of the other ship,
that cold open.
There's a nice outtake in the beginning.
Absolutely. Oh, man. So we see the babyface duo go over there. We hear from Buzz Sawyer, and he's returning with Terry Gordy. Remember, Ole had mentioned both of those guys, like you pointed out earlier, and Ole Anderson going to join both of these men. It's good to see Gordy make it to the studio. More talk against some of the baby faces. Both guys, Buzz and Gordy, happy to associate with Ole. Anderson says he likes winners, and these guys are winners. As Gordon Solie bids us adieu from the Peach State of Georgia. So Michael Hayes gets 10 seconds. Gordy doesn't get a whole lot more, maybe 10 seconds of mic time. But he's factored in, at least storyline-wise, to a potential partner of one Ole Anderson.
Right. Do you happen to catch what Piper does now when they end the first hour and they end the end of the show? Whoever Gordon's interviewing, as Gordon goes to sign off, Piper comes walking behind Gordon,
smiles,
and gives like a big smile and a little wave. What a classy guy.
What a classy guy. Got to make sure, well, hey, man, he's the co-host. He needs to be on screen. And, he's in a great mood. Why not? I mean, you're out there with Gordon Solie. You're promoting Georgia Championship Wrestling nationwide. He's always saying hello to the people in Portland. So he's got to be a babyface out there anyway. Stay babyface out there in Portland, no matter what.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com, and to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop, But that's not all. You can also check out the Pro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puroresu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Rasslin Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Rasslin Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Rasslin Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, Patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive watch-along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
As we continue on, we go to the house shows. January 2nd, later that day, Augusta, Georgia, Bell Auditorium. Jim Garvin over Ricky Harris. Buzz Sawyer putting away Mr. Wrestling number 2. It's Bob Armstrong. He talked about this one. Scoring a win over the Great Kabuki. 6-man tag team action. Going to see Big Red, Leroy Brown, and Brad Armstrong defeating Austin Idol, Super Destroyer, and Kevin Sullivan. What an odd trio that makes. Wildfire, Tommy Rich over the Masked Superstar by DQ in the main event. It's a strap match ending in a disqualification.
I wonder what kind of disqualification that was.
I'm assuming that we got a run-in of some sort, maybe a big schmoz, to quote the Hitman there, because we see a lot of guys tied to both of those men. I could see Super D and company, everybody starting to do a little run-in at the end of that. But again, you know.
And Leroy Brown, yeah.
Yeah.
And Big Red, a lot of connections there.
Kabuki doing jobs, though, jobbing to the Bullet out here, who's a tag team champion at this point in time, and Buzz Sawyer continuing to put down Wrestling 2, who still has one big run left in him for the Mid-South, but not so much here in Georgia. We continue on to Chattanooga, January the 3rd, Memorial Auditorium, Jimmy Garvin over the French Angel, Ron Bass downing El Gran Apollo, the Armstrongs defeating Buzz Sawyer and Kevin Sullivan by DQ. Hell of a team. That's talking about Buzz coming back to WCW near the end of his run. He was part of Kevin's Slaughterhouse deal. And that could have been interesting if they had teamed them up at least a year or two earlier, maybe after the old the Varsity Club.
Love the Varsity Club, but
it's the only time I liked Mike Rotunda. He fit that gimmick well. Looks like Tommy Rich in Chattanooga going to go to a double count out with Austin Idol Dolan. So Idol going to job for Big Red, but I ain't jobbing to Tommy Rich because that means that I can't beat the main event guy out there. Also, Superstar and Super D defeating Leroy Brown and Big Red in tag team action. Also, January 3rd, Marietta, Georgia, Cobb County Civic Center. Jim Garvin again over Ricky Harris. Ron Bass defeating Gran Apollo. Terry Gordy scoring a win over Leroy Brown. And then Gordy doing double duty, battling Jim Garvin to a double countout. Very peculiar match there. Kevin Sullivan scoring a win over Wrestling 2. Austin Idol over Tommy Rich by DQ. And the Armstrongs, wow, in the main event over Superstar and Super D.
And I love that Superstar, Super D combination. Going forward, I think they could be very formidable as we move along.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I haven't been a big fan of reading the results with them and Big Red and Leroy Brown because that just doesn't sound like a good match, but I'd be very curious to see them in there with the Armstrongs and Austin Idol and Tommy Rich on top as well. I love it. I like Kevin Sullivan in Wrestling 2. It's different. It's something different for Kevin, something different for Wrestling 2. So some interesting matches here in Marietta. And of course it is Armstrong country, so they get the main event and they go over. And they retain the national tag team titles as we roll off. They promise this week, headed to Ohio, January 4th, Dayton, Ohio. Hare Arena was there for a couple of ECW pay-per-views many moons later. Jimmy Garvin over the French Angel, Bob Armstrong defeating Ron Bass. It's Brad Armstrong taking Buzz Sawyer to a draw. That had to be cool. Terry Gordy teaming with Super D here in Dayton over Michael Hayes and Wrestling 2. And it's Tommy Rich defeating Superstar by DQ.
Yeah, another solid card. A great way to start your Ohio tour here, especially Brad and Buzz probably tore the house down.
Oh, yeah, that had to be a hell of a fun match. Going to a time limit draw, whether it was 15, 20 minutes, I'm sure it was action in between. Armstrong and Sawyer at this point, young pups, if you will, to the business. So they're ready to go, So I'm sure it was a fun time out there as we continue on to Canton, Ohio. The Canton Civic Center, January the 5th. It's Bob Armstrong over the French Angel. Jimmy Garvin defeating Ron Bass. Brad Armstrong again taking Buzz Sawyer to a draw. Michael Hayes over Terry Gordy by DQ. Those damn Freebirds just can't separate. And in the main event, well, he said he'd be teaming with Tommy. It is Wrestling 2 and Wildfire Tommy Rich over Super Destroyer and Super D. And then they move down south to Ashland, Kentucky, just across the Cincinnati, into the border, over across the border. January 6th, in Ashland, we're going to see Grand Apollo over the French Angel. Jim Garvin defeat Tony Anthony, the future Dirty White Boy, and he is from Kentucky, I do believe, or Tennessee, so it makes sense that he would kind of randomly pop up here. Michael Hayes over at Super Destroyer by DQ. Buzz Sawyer taking Wrestling 2 to a draw. It's the Armstrongs teaming up to defeat Terry Gordy and Ron Bass, and this time Tommy Rich scoring a pinfall victory over the Masked Superstar in Ashland.
Yeah, Gordy and Bass getting familiar with each other for their upcoming title match.
Maybe Ron Bass learned right here. Gordy, I'm going to be your partner at the Omni. And Ron Bass said, no shit. Okay, well, we better get our shit together here. Take it on the Armstrongs in Kentucky. It's just kind of odd to see Tony Anthony just pop up here, but it makes sense because, again, he's from that area, Tennessee, Kentucky, working the Outlaws and the other territories down there. And I'm not sure if he made it to Crockett yet or not. I know that's going to happen around this time frame. As we continue on, January 7th, Charleston, West Virginia, the Civic Center. Brad Armstrong over French Angel. Wow, did he fall down the card here in Charleston? Jimmy Garvin taking Ron Bass to a draw. No, thank you. Buzz Sawyer over Wrestling 2 by DQ. Michael Hayes teaming with Bob Armstrong to defeat Terry Gordy and Super Destroyer. And Tommy Rich defeating the Masked Superstar by a countout. As we conclude the week, we head back up to Ohio, January 8th, Zanesville, Ohio. And I'll tell you why in a moment, why we're going from north to south, back to north. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But first, looking at the results in Zanesville, Buzz Sawyer taking Brad Armstrong to a draw. Ron Bass over Jimmy Garvin. Michael Hayes scoring a win over his Freebird buddy Gordy on a DQ. And Tommy Rich again teaming with Wrestling 2 to defeat Superstar and Super D. Now, the reason we start up north in Dayton and Canton and things of that nature, we move down south and over to West Virginia and back, is Bob Roop has explained they like to use the Columbus airport. And so it always started in Columbus. Even if they were working other towns in Michigan or Kentucky or West Virginia, it always started there, and they would drive from Columbus to these other towns. So Zanesville is basically them working their way back to take the plane flight back to Georgia.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense right there.
And that's their first week on tour in the new areas of Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia. Very exciting for Georgia Championship Wrestling fans. They're beginning to expand, and we're going to see even more towns, Michigan, Cleveland, along the way. But right now we continue on the following week TV, January 9th, Atlanta at the TBS studios. Host is Gordon Soley and Rod Piper as we get a congratulations at the top of the show. Gordon congratulating the Hot Rod on the newly won Mid-Atlantic Championship. Roddy Piper, the Mid-Atlantic Champion, announced here on GCW TV As also the NWA World Champion Ric Flair is en route to the studio, we learn. So the Nature Boy going to be here before the episode is over.
Yeah, we haven't seen the Nature Boy in the studio for a while, so it'll be nice to see him again. It's
been a little bit, and, very cool to acknowledge Hot Rod as not just winning a title in another territory, but the title, to some anyway, the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight title. It's not the U.S. title, but it'll do. Also, the Masked Superstar coming out to interrupt the conversation here. More talk of that upcoming cage match with Tommy Rich on the 17th. We also learned that Bad Leroy Brown has been announced as the special outside policeman for the bout, just to make sure there's no interference. Leroy Brown going to hold the key to the cage.
Interesting. He has the key already, and they don't even have the cage built.
Very good call. Well, they haven't probably.
I guess we got to suspend disbelief here a little bit.
Probably haven't even purchased the lock yet, Jamie, but they have the key.
That's the important part. You can't open a cage if you don't have the key. Whether it's the key for that lock or not, that's okay.
And of course, nobody's ever climbed a cage before, so there's no way in, no way out. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that. They're going to talk about it ad nauseum until we get there. Right now, we go to the ring for Wildfire Tommy Rich in action, taking on Marvin Turner. Referee for hour number 1, Nick Patrick. Once again, Tommy in full control as we see the superstars show up back in the studio here to study the Wildfire from afar. But Leroy Brown also out to police the superstars' viewing of one Wildfire Tommy Rich. Going to watch the Wildfire's back here. Good visual for things to come with all of these guys. Superstar even going to lend some words of advice to Marvin Turner at one point. Tell him what to do in there, but doesn't get Marvin too far. The Feds press going to end things here for Tommy Rich, 5 minutes, 43 seconds.
I remember when I watched that originally, I thought it was pretty cool that Superstar gave Marvin Turner a little bit of advice. Like you said, it didn't help him any, but it was a nice little visual.
Yeah, it is. It's just like when you see one of the enhancement guys late in a battle royal, the final 2, 3, 4 guys. You like to see that every once in a while, that anything can happen, or that I'm glad, you feel for these guys watching them get their asses whipped every week on TV. So it's nice to see somebody trying to help one of them, even if it's to help themselves here, which didn't go too far for the Superstar, but Tommy Rich coming out a winner. We'll see if that happens inside the cage. And I love the visual, like you said, of Superstar coming out to watch Tommy Rich and then Leroy Brown coming out. So you're seeing the entire main event out here. You're seeing all the pieces of the main event. We know Superstar's wrestling Tommy Rich. We know Leroy Brown is going to be ringside. So we get all of the names involved out here at one point in time, yet nobody has to cross paths. So very well done, I thought. Good booking.
Right. It's almost Gang Wars years ahead of time.
Well, we continue on. Ole Anderson and Buzz Sawyer out for an interview, as this is where we learn Gene Anderson is out of action, now acting as a manager up in the Mid-Atlantic, but Ole has been told he needs a partner in order to defend his World Tag Team titles. So he has taken on Buzz Sawyer, at least for now. Ole is fine taking a new partner. He's fine being sent to any city in the country, but he refuses to wrestle Leroy Brown and Big Red. So that's where he draws the line. Gordon explaining that, well, if you don't defend the tag titles against Brown and Red, the NWA has announced that Ole will be stripped of the World Tag Team titles. And you might imagine Anderson none too pleased with that announcement.
Yeah, Ole blew a gasket on that one. He was not happy.
Well, we've seen him be nasty. We've seen him be angry, but this time he was irate. You don't tell me who I have to wrestle, much less tell me if I don't wrestle them, you're stripping me of the belts. So we'll continue to monitor that storyline as it progresses in the weeks to come, or maybe just the days to come. Stay tuned, guys, as we continue on. Back to the ring, Jim Garvin taking on Buck Brannigan, or as Gordon calls him here, Butch Brannigan. A little faux pas on Gordon's part. Maybe been in the sauce this morning. Extended amateur stuff here from Jimmy Garvin on the mat. He has Brannigan all over the canvas. They eventually wind up on their feet, and Garvin lays the boom. That forearm to the jaw gets it done. 4 minutes, 57 seconds. Another win for Jimmy Garvin against the big boy, Buck Brannigan.
Hey, they always say you hit somebody in the jaw if you're going to get in a fight, and that'll take them down. And that's what Garvin's doing very well right now.
He certainly is.
Knocking these guys out. And you know what? Brannigan's no small man. I think that maybe, another time, another promotion, they might have been able to do something with Brannigan. At least made him a nice mid-card heel somewhere.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that got some use in those outlaw organizations. I think he might have even popped up in another small territory or two and got a little bit of a run there as well. And I use the term run loosely, but Yeah, Brannigan had the size, and he was here quite a bit to kind of have an idea of what he was doing in the ring to some degree. Now, you talk about getting hit in the jaw. Now, people talk about a glass jaw. You go down pretty easy, a shot to the jaw. You didn't need a glass jaw when Jimmy Garvin was throwing these forearms. These are not something to be messed with. As we continue, more hard sell on that January 17th Omni show. We hear from Tommy Rich and Leroy Brown. Leroy showing off the key to the cage more than a week in advance. He's already got the key to the cage, okay? I guess that visual effect is what that's all about. We also hear from the Armstrongs, who have Ron Bass and Terry Gordy at the Omni, so that match definitely locked in now. I believe even Ron realizes it. So we go back to the ring, singles action. Going to see the National Heavyweight Champion, the Masked Superstar, or Superstar, depending on who you ask, taking on Vinny Valentino. So maybe Tony's name going to change pretty soon here. Vinny Valentino back in the territory as Super Destroyer out here watching the back of his masked friend. Buzz Sawyer, Ole Anderson, Tommy Rich, the Armstrongs all begin trickling in around ringside. This is a small TV studio, guys, but like a machine, a buzzsaw in the ring. Superstar showing Tommy Rich up close and personal what he's capable of. Talking trash to the Wildfire in between. It's a Russian leg sweep and the Cobra Clutch, giving the Superstar the win, 3 minutes, 32 seconds.
That's a great combo that the Superstar uses there.
Yeah, it looked really good, very smooth, nice transition from the leg sweep into the Cobra Clutch. But you got to love the visual. We talked about it earlier. We saw a couple guys come out during Tommy Rich's match, but now we're seeing a whole assortment of talent out here that all have issues with one another, heels and faces.
Yeah, as I mentioned a little bit ago, the gang warfare early. I mean,
yeah,
they had them on both sides of the ring, and it would have been a real explosive situation. All those guys had jumped in at one time because there was a lot of meat.
We're back to that meat again. Absolutely.
We're back to the meat again. If they'd all got in the ring at the same time. Because Superstar and Super D aren't small guys either.
No, definitely not. And, Tommy Rich does enter the ring, ready for the Superstar, calling him on, but the Masked Man thinks the wiser and leaves with his heel buddies. Another teaser for the Omni and, well, basically every other city that matters in the territory, because these guys will be making the loop, whether it's in a cage, in a strap match, or just in a one-on-one encounter. They're doing a lot of Tommy Rich and Superstar right now. They are the talk of the town, if you will. And of course, it's all going to come to a head very shortly here in the month of January. Right now, we continue on with the program. Bob Armstrong stopping by to talk to Gordon, explaining the situation between the Superstar and Tommy Rich. Bob has nothing to do with it, Jamie, but he's going to talk about it. And while Roddy Piper moves to the other side of Gordon, he doesn't leave the interview this time. Usually Piper leaves when Bob or Brad, well, basically Bob comes over to talk. Roddy will quietly stroll off camera, but this time he's going to stick around, just move to the other side. In fact, Hot Rod has a lot to say to the Bullet here this week, and I can't wait for this. Armstrong states that they came out in support and backup for Tommy Rich just now, but Roddy, he thinks he came out for more publicity. The same reason he's interrupting the show right now. I wrote, I love it. Roddy says, you didn't come out here to help Tommy Rich. You came out here to be on TV, just like why you're out here right now.
Yeah, Piper told Armstrong exactly what it was. And I don't know if it was Ole or not, but whoever came up with the idea to hook these two together, it was gold.
Yeah. You talk about Piper and Lawler being several years too late, but Piper and Armstrong, just the perfect timing.
I mean, going back to when Piper first got here and the Armstrongs debuted there like a week or two after Halloween, these two guys have just been going at it nonstop. And, it's the powder keg is going to explode sooner or later.
Yeah, and with Bob Armstrong, before my time, but also not in my territory, even if it weren't. So I don't know when I don't know if he came in with the gift of gab or if it took him several years to, develop it, but he's ready to go here. He's certainly this late into his career, and he's got words back for Roddy Piper, but Piper continues on. He feels Armstrong cheapens Gordon Soley's segment. The Bullet agrees that Gordon has been cheapened by Roddy's arrival. Wow. The Bullet then walking off as Piper encouraging Bob Armstrong to stop taking the little digs and say something to his face, as things finally seem to escalate beyond just kind of a little back and forth, a little jibber jab in the pass. This time they have some serious words for one another.
Yeah, as I just said, it's just pure gold between these two guys right now. And myself, at this point, I had never even seen Bob Armstrong in the magazines.
Okay.
Because he'd spent all that time in
Alabama.
Alabama or Knoxville.
Yep.
I never read about Bob Armstrong, so I had no idea who he was. I mean, I picked up real quick he was some kind of Georgia legend who was around years before.
Right.
And it wouldn't be for a few years yet that would I actually know exactly who Bob Armstrong was and why this all made perfect sense. And as I said, the marriage of these two guys was just gold to help bring Georgia Championship Wrestling back up from that little down period we had just experienced.
Yeah, you think about it. Bob Armstrong played a big part in the Georgia War going back a decade before this. So Bob, definitely known by the Georgia fans specifically, and he'd been around the business for quite a while, been around the block, Bob Armstrong, and one of the most beloved wrestlers in the territory right now is the Bullet, and for good reason. And also, as promised at the top of the show, Gordon Solie says the world champion was en route. Ric Flair has arrived, it would appear, looking all business in a custom-made suit, holding those 10 pounds of gold in his hands. How lucky the women are that can say for the rest of their lives they've been with the world champion. They've been with the Nature Boy. He says diamonds are forever, and of course so is Ric Flair. Very basic promo. I hate that they flew him here and drove him in for these little 60-second generic promos, but I guess when you have the world champion on your TV screen, it's just a big deal.
Yeah, they want to put over the NWA, and it was, best for business to have your NWA champion on there as much as possible. I mean, let's go back to September when he won the belt. He was on 9 or 10 straight episodes. And
right.
even
it's
if
quite a while.
He wasn't live, they gave you an interview that they didn't say was pre-recorded.
Right.
So you really didn't know whether it was live or not, even though you and I and most people realized he wasn't actually in the studio and it was a pre-recorded interview.
Yeah.
So they spent all that time putting the NWA title over, and he hadn't been around for a little bit. So let's get him some exposure since we're into the new year.
Right. Of course, the NWA goes from coast to coast around the world. And so that only makes sense to get him on cable TV, which can be seen apparently at least as far as Portland at this point in time, the way Roddy Piper says hello to his family and friends anyway. So yeah, you make a good point there in regards to all of that and the Nature Boy being here, even if he doesn't wrestle, not just on TV, but not even on the house shows, even if he's just flown in for the TV and flown right back out to work, say Kansas City, God forbid, later that day. I'm sure he'd rather stuck around here. But yeah, the Nature Boy is here. We're going to hear from him again. We go back to the ring though. Mr. Wrestling 2 taking on Ed Timms, as Roddy Piper basically going to use this match to talk trash on the gutless Bob Armstrong. Wrestling 2 going to dominate this one. $1 million knee lift, scoring the win, 3 minutes and 57 seconds. The match was just there. It's a backstory. We saw that a lot in the WWF when they would come out of a big angle. We would see, I don't know, a Tito Santana or a guy like that, Coco Beware, one of the guys in the late 80s that weren't really getting the push. We would see one of their matches, and then McMahon and Jesse would talk over it to discuss the big hot angle that we just witnessed or whatnot. And so we kind of use this match here as an opportunity for Roddy to shoot his mouth off on the Bullet.
And that's something Dusty Rhodes would do in Jim Crockett Promotions when he was booking there from 85 to 88.
So Hot Rod runs his mouth for the duration of that match, and it looks like Bob Armstrong was listening in the back. The Bullet returns briefly to send a message to Roddy. Bob says it's not a matter of having no guts. It's having commitments right now. That's why they haven't stepped in the ring. Bob Armstrong has national tag team title commitments and teaming with his son, Brad. But he wants Roddy to know the minute those commitments are done, Piper is first on his list. I absolutely love it. Roddy has words in response as Bob confirms what we already figured. This shit will indeed get physical.
Oh, and I can't wait for it to happen. It'll bring back such great memories. I still have it's jumping forward, but I still have an audio tape of the famous angle that we're going to get to in about another month.
Whew, yeah, I can't wait to get there. But again, things have escalated quickly here into 1982. Before it was just some jabs thrown back and forth and the guys kind of walking away. But this time, Bob Armstrong straight up says, hey, man, I got some title defenses coming up. But after that, I'm whipping your ass next, Roddy. So it's a promise. When an Armstrong makes a promise, it's going to happen, especially the Bullet. So I'm looking forward to when we get there. But right now, we also hear an interview from Ron Bass, who is the exact opposite of a Bob Armstrong or Roddy Piper promo. Not very good, but he is also coming for the Armstrong's belts because, well, he's a heel. And we see the heel in the ring, Ron Bass, taking on Tony Anthony, the future TL Hopper, the future Dirty White Boy. Tony ducking and dodging early on, gaining control, flustering the Outlaw, but it doesn't take long for Ron Bass to take over and land that power slam, Texas Stampede, getting it done in 2 minutes time. So Ron Bass, even though he's coming to the Omni in the tag team title situation, can't seem to find Terry Gordy for a match on TV.
Another weak spot of Ole. Just how much did he hate Gordy and Hayes?
Exactly. Yeah.
Not to use them. I mean, it's
not even like you have to pay them for the TV, right? Those guys didn't get paid, right? Just the job guys got paid.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Even if he did, it wasn't much. I don't know. I don't understand what it was either, but we continue on. Speaking of Ole, we hear from Ole and Buzz Sawyer up next, announcing that Buzz is officially the new co-holder of the World Tag Team titles. I don't remember that, not in my record books. But we also hear from the other side, Big Red and Leroy Brown, who want a title shot. They say it'll be the first time ever in history. Black World Tag Team champions. Big Red and Leroy Brown coming for those world titles. Ole Anderson and new partner, Buzz Sawyer.
I wonder up in Mid-Atlantic if Ole was using somebody else to be his partner for Gene.
He was not.
Or did they just forget about it up there at this point?
I don't remember when they announced that the titles are dissolved or basically vacant for a while, pending all those made-up mock tournaments around the world and things that they do for months on end before Ole gets fired as booker and leaves with the tag team titles. Before they do all of that, I don't know. I don't remember. I know Buzz doesn't go up there, and I don't remember Ole really teaming with anyone besides Stan Hansen, but that's more for the tournament. So it's a good question what they're doing at this point in time. I don't know that they're doing much of anything about it at this point in time. I'd have to go back and watch the Mid-Atlantic footage again, but we do see for now, the new World Tag Team champions, Ole and Buzz in the ring, taking on Archie Williams and Grant Apollo, as Roddy Piper putting over Brett Sawyer, the Pacific Northwest heavyweight champion out in Portland. He says that Buzz comes from a family of champions. So Roddy, again, finding a way to work in Portland, the Portland territory, and even putting over Buzz's younger brother, Brett, at the same time.
He referred to him as Hacksaw.
Yeah, that's right. Hacksaw Sawyer.
For that.
Red and Leroy Brown going to come out to watch the champions up close and personal. A lot of that this week. This is like the third match where people are coming out to quote-unquote scout talent. Apollo surprises Sawyer with a near fall, but Archie Williams tags in, and it's right back to the heels on top. Buzz Sawyer with his patented power slam, like only he can do, pinning Williams 4 minutes and 20 seconds. And we're about to close hour number one. What did you think of Ole? We've seen a lot of Buzz in the ring. We've heard a lot of Ole putting them over, but we finally get to see these guys team up.
It was just like having the Andersons in the ring, whether it was Gene or Lars. They were machines. And
minus
Buzz
the whole tick thing.
Yeah,
sorry, guys.
But on a side note, do you know who Archie Williams is?
I do not.
That is our boy Tony Valentino, aka Tony Zane, under another name.
Are you kidding me? I didn't even pay attention. I wish I had. Now I'm going to go back and watch that. I mean, I don't doubt you, but they've been calling him Tony Valentino. Vinny Valentino returns this week. I was wondering why Tony Zane wasn't on the show, because I was waiting to see if they changed his name. And here, apparently, I was looking for a Tony, and he was an Archie. So we got an Archie Williams.
I mean, I'm not 100%, but as soon as he walked into the ring, I'm expecting him to say Tony Valentino when I'm looking at the guy, and then they announced him as Archie Williams. When they come back for the second match in the second hour, there's no doubt in my mind at that point that it's the same guy.
Williams going to do the job here. Grant Apollo walks in, stands over him, and says, "Oh, Archie." No, that really didn't happen, but Apollo, he came in. He looked like he was going to get some kind of a push, and they really haven't done a whole lot with him since that point in time. Now, I talked about before, there's reportedly stories. Now, he had a short-lived wrestling career, did Grant Apollo. He was pretty decent in the ring overall, but I've heard, just a personality conflict with the rest of the wrestlers. They weren't fans of Grant Apollo, the human being.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about that. I thought I remember hearing something when he leaves here, he goes back down to Florida, and because he came from Florida before he came here.
Right.
And he returns to Florida, and then one day he just disappears and you never see him again.
Well, I've heard things about constantly hitting on Barbara Clary, making her feel uncomfortable, to just a brash, cocky attitude that just wasn't no reason. Like nobody understood why this guy was just this, and this is just reporting stories that wrestlers told super fans, told whomever, But that's the story I always got of Grand Apollo and why it was never meant to be. But it's unfortunate. You know, he was decent enough that he could have stuck around a while in the business. As we close up hour number 1, we get a confrontation between the two teams talking about Ole Anderson and Buzz Sawyer, and of course Leroy Brown and Big Red. And afterwards, Ole's saying, "Where we come from, we don't wrestle people like you." As the heels then walk off, Leroy and Big Red respond to those comments. They said they've been waiting for the opportunity and the time has finally arrived. Wow, Ole Anderson, "Where we come from, we don't wrestle people like you." And you know the implication there just feels out of date, right, in 1982. But it is the South. I get it to a degree. But it just seemed like an interesting place to go when you're fighting guys this size. Like, who's looking at their ethnicity when you've got two guys that have to weigh well over 900 pounds combined?
Yeah, and unfortunately, this must have been an Ole Anderson thing, because a year later, he's going to play that same card with Butch Reed and Tony Atlas.
Okay.
When they come into Georgia. And it actually, by the end of 82, Butch Reed is in. So Ole, just looking back, it was disgusting, and it should have never been that way. But that was culture then.
Well, it was certainly Ole's culture. I mean, we've heard
it was
stories,
always
right?
culture. Yeah, not everybody's culture, but it was always culture, and even I've never really been comfortable with that.
Well, we continue on with hour number 2. Going to kick off. Gordon and Roddy Piper still out here as we see the national tag team champions, the Armstrongs, out to take on Ricky Harris, and Buck Brannigan back as well. Scrappy McGowan, now the referee for hour number 2. Roddy Piper on commentary thinks Brad Armstrong, he's a fine wrestler. Just too bad he's latched on to his daddy. Some big men beating on Brad in the ring. Roddy Piper would be embarrassed if he let his son get beaten on like that and not come in to his aid. Didn't we talk about sacrifice? Never mind. It's hot rod out here. Ricky Harris works a full Nelson, but Brad going to escape that. Piper says he's seen enough. He's disgusted at Bob Armstrong's lack of guts to protect his son. Meanwhile, in the ring, Brad Armstrong working the majority of the matchup. So Roddy going to make a coffee run for he and Gordon. Do you like it? How do you like your coffee? And Gordon says, of course, black. He takes his black because he needs that after, a night or morning of, been in the sauce. But Brad Armstrong eventually landing a surprise crossbody, pinning the larger Buck Brannigan. Match goes 5:51. Talk to me of anything that sticks out to you here. The win, Brad Armstrong, Roddy Piper's commentary, whatever you got.
Well, Piper's commentary is just, again, right on. Now, when the Armstrongs first came in, Piper's complaint was that Bob wouldn't leave Brad in the ring.
Right.
And now he's complaining because he is leaving him in the ring.
Yeah, he said the Armstrongs wouldn't go far because Bob wouldn't sacrifice his son for the greater good. And now that Bob's doing that, Roddy's complaining about him allowing his son to get his ass whipped.
Yeah, because now Roddy would never do that. But, a couple months ago, he would leave his son in there
that's right.
to get his ass whipped.
Classic heel shtick.
He can learn. Oh,
yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Great stuff.
So they pick up the win. The Armstrongs going to join Gordon out there. It's almost like Roddy knew they were coming, so he's off to go grab some coffee. Bob Armstrong wonders, where's Roddy Piper? He isn't shocked that Roddy aligned himself with Gary Hart in the Great Kabuki either. As we go back to last week, we get a replay of Piper, who announces he'll be filling in for Gary Hart at the Omni as the manager of Kabuki. And once the Armstrongs leave, Roddy Piper randomly returns and responds, because of course he does. Classic heel shit here from the Hot Rod. Promo time also with Austin Idol back again, Dolan. We saw him in a couple of the house show results before they moved on to the Ohio run. But Austin Idol down here in Georgia, and professional jealousy, talking about the baby faces in that instance. So I guess that means Austin Idol is back as a heel.
Yeah, we haven't seen Idol on TV since before Thanksgiving. So it's nice to see Austin back. And he even mentions a name that we're going to see in a match later on that they hadn't even talked about returning yet.
Okay.
So talking about, as we referenced Ron Bass not knowing what was going on, Idol's giving away spoilers.
Well, he saw somebody in the backstage studio. He just assumed. He just popped up. He doesn't know if this guy's been here last week or the week before. It's Austin Idol at the end of the day. I mean, he's not paying attention to anything except Austin Idol.
And that's the way it should be if you're Austin Idol.
Well, I guess so. He's going to step in the ring here, take on Archie Williams, perhaps Tony Zane. Wrestling this week from Austin Idol in the ring, a change of pace. Actually actual wrestling moves, including a head scissors and a nasty top wrist lock. Looking good in there, darling. Eventually, it's a pretty basic body slam and an elbow on Williams' face that finishes him off. I think Idol realized how green Archie was and just put him away. Match goes 4:48. I think Idol was trying to give him a little something, and it wasn't really happening, and Austin just took it home.
And I'm going to guess Archie was a little too big to get the Vegas leg lock on.
I don't know, man. I bet he could put it on Big Red. I don't know, man. It's Austin Idol. If anybody can do it, it's Austin. As we continue on, Tommy Rich out here, he says he has Georgia on his mind and Superstar not far behind. We also hear more from Ole Anderson and Buzz Sawyer continuing to sell their matchup at the Omni. Then we hear from Jimmy Garvin. It's a trifecta of promos. Garvin's been wrestling since the age of 9, of course, amateur at that point, but he's here to be noticed. He's here on TBS, and he hasn't gotten it yet, but he's going to have his turn on top. So Jimmy Garvin, he's not a heel yet, but it certainly sounds, based on what we've seen in the ring and what we're hearing here in interviews, very subtle, but it almost feels like he's trying to turn himself heel, whether Ole realizes it or not.
No, I have to agree with you on that one. I mean, maybe in Garvin's own mind, he was going to get in a tag team with someone and then talk to Ole into letting him turn heel. Even his run before this in Mid-South, I believe he was a face. He hasn't been a heel since Florida.
Right. I guess you can go back also when he was the valet of the Garvins and whatnot. But yeah, it's been a while since Jimmy Garvin did any heel stuff. In the Mid-South, he was a baby face before he came here to Georgia. So Garvin has a little promo there, and he steps in the ring to take on Snake Brown. What a unique character was Snake Brown. Garvin again goes for the amateur-esque approach to begin things. Surprisingly, Snake slipping free of a couple of moves, but eventually Brown can't escape that forearm shot across the mush. Going to give Garvin the win, 3 minutes and 17 seconds. We go on. Roddy Piper making some comments about subbing in for Gary Hart, managing the Great Kabuki. We finally see the footage from the Omni. It's been quite a while to explain the backstory where Kabuki misted Dusty Rhodes, Gary Hart playing a part in that, and Dusty going down before the match can happen between Big Dust and Ric Flair, was it not?
Yes, that's exactly what it was. It was Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes. And they've already had their rematch at the Omni, in which
yes,
I'm surprised to see him going back to it so quick.
Yeah, and so I guess the gimmick in this round is that Gary Hart is barred from the Omni, but of course they've found a way around that. Dusty Rhodes, we see him there in the VTR entering the ring in a pretty white robe and is immediately caught with a green mist to the eyes. A blinded Dusty molested the referee, according to Roddy Piper here in the comment. You got to love that. Dusty couldn't see, didn't know he was grabbing, and had his hands all over the ref, and Roddy Piper referring to it as molesting the referee. So the VTR also going to show Kabuki in a quick squash match from a few weeks ago. Piper commenting over top of it, hard selling the return match between the American Dream and Kabuki at the Omni upcoming. Roddy Piper going to be in the corner of Kabuki, and just really well done because we get to see the video footage, which is always fun, but we get to hear Roddy Piper's version of what's happening.
Right. Now, did you say earlier on you knew the shoot reason why Gary Hart wasn't at this show?
He was in Dallas. He was back in Dallas.
Oh, okay.
Right here is when Dallas goes and changes up their production. This is when they go big time. Oh, actually, they come from big time to world class, but no pun intended, they go big time with, the new the camera crew and everything that happened down there at this point in time. It happens right around now. And Gary Hart is the booker, if I'm not mistaken. He's certainly coming back into the territory at that point. So
okay, that explains it.
Yeah, so Gary's working double duty at this point in time, and he can't be there. He can't be unlike Kabuki, who used the Magic Dragon to work as Kabuki in some of the other territories when he couldn't make it. Gary Hart didn't have that luxury, right? So he can only be in one place. So we get Hot Rod here in the Omni.
Yeah. Hey, have you ever noticed that when Gary Hart has those sunglasses on and he turns the right direction, kind of looks like Carl Winslow from Family Matters?
Well, if Carl lost a lot of weight,
lost a lot of weight. Facially, I should rephrase that. Facially, he looks like Carl Winslow.
I guess I could see that.
And they're both from Chicago.
Well, that's true. That part you got right. Well, at least the character Carl Winslow's from Chicago. I'm not sure where Reginald Vell Johnson hails from. But yeah, Carl Winslow from the mean streets of Chicago. Quite a cop, that Carl Winslow. Even made it to Nakatomi Towers at one point, I heard, to help out Bruce Willis. But we'll continue on. Kevin Sullivan in the ring taking on Tommy Rogers this week. That could be a fun match if Rogers wasn't used as a job guy here. Sullivan ruthless, a knee in the face of Tommy at one point, double stomp into the gut, and of course dropping Tommy across the top rope, landing a diving knee off the middle rope, giving Kevin the win, 3 minutes and 20 seconds. We also hear from Sullivan in an interview, who recently set a record in his weight class, squatted 225 pounds 26 times, or as Roddy said on commentary, it was something like 26 pounds or 226 times or something, but Gordon had to correct him.
He reversed it. Yeah, he reversed it.
So Sullivan referring to himself as a 3-time bodybuilding contest winner. He has the body, he has the looks, and he has the wrestling ability to be the best. Kevin Sullivan back in Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, the body's still cut. It's not cut like it was last March when we were covering Georgia Championship
him
Wrestling.
better here.
But he's still, I mean, put a little bit of weight on, but he's still looking good.
I think the weight helps him, especially with his height. I think the weight helps Kevin.
Yeah, because he really looked almost anorexic going back to March. and speaking of March, poor Tommy Rogers. Last April, he gets a title shot at the Omni against Les Thornton, and now he's reverted all the way back to just being enhancement talent.
Yeah, it's peculiar. When I saw Tommy's
name,
I thought,
hopes for him.
Yeah, I thought Tommy was going to get one of those Bruno Jr. type pushes, or Grant Apollo, I guess, or Brian Blair, Jim Garvin type pushes here, but that's just not the case. Ole's really just using him as fodder in the ring. He's not even making the towns. He's not used in that preliminary match to start off the house shows even. Tommy's just here strictly as TV talent at this point in time.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Ric Flair is in town. He is here in the studio, and so we get our second interview from the Nature Boy, who says, no brag, just facts. He is the world champion and will be for a long time to come. I go back to another quick, easy promo here from the Nature Boy, the world champion, and I think that's pretty much all he's going to do here this week on TV, guys, but we continue on. And you talk about random names showing up in the last couple weeks of television, Stan Hansen, the Funk Brothers. Now it's time for Terry Taylor taking on Marvin Turner. Fast action, no stop in motion in this one, which makes it feel like this won't go very long. Taylor moving at 100 miles an hour, and it doesn't stop Terry until he lands the abdominal stretch, rolling it back into a cradle. Match only goes 1 minute and 10 seconds. And of all the people to cut time on, couldn't have been Ron Bass. Had to be Terry Taylor getting a whole whopping 1 minute to show his stuff.
Right, and for those that don't realize, Austin Idol mentioned Terry Taylor's name. That's who I was talking about a little bit earlier.
Well, that made total sense. That's probably why I didn't write it, so I didn't spoil it for myself here before we got to Terry. But it's fun to see Terry here on TV. I just hate the fact that we finally get him on television and he gets a whole minute of TV time. Now, there's a lot of guys on the roster that could have easily went a minute here from, say, Leroy Brown and Big Red, for instance, but it is what it is. We get more Omni shilling from the Superstar, from Big Red, from Leroy Brown. Then it's to the ring tag team action. Going to see the Superstar and Super D taking on Tony Anthony and Gran Apollo. As Apollo surprising the Superstar early with a crossbody and dropkick to start out the match. The Masked Man, though, going to take a powder, regroup, and then Tony Anthony in, but he's not quite as successful as Apollo was. Superstar turns a bear hug into a spine buster. Really awesome spot. And he gets the win, 5 minutes and 42 seconds.
Yeah, Superstar was just so great at this time. Always coming up with something different. I hadn't remember seeing him use that maneuver.
No,
up to this point.
And a lot of spine busters before Arn Anderson era were pretty generic. They weren't pretty to look at, right? They weren't as good or smooth or pretty. But man, that was believable. And you never, any move that comes out of a bear hug and winds up looking that good, God bless them, because nothing looks pretty coming out of a bear hug.
Gordon gave Tony Anthony a little bit of love during that match, saying that he was a Navy champion. So I'm going to guess Tony was probably legit Navy.
Yeah, it's very likely. I don't know his background. That's somebody I didn't study up on. That'd be somebody I'd have to ask, like Gene Jackson about, or Steve Crawford might have answers to Tony's background and who trained him and whatnot. Tony has his own podcast now, I do believe, or it's upcoming or something along those lines. I'd be interested to hear Tony and tell some of his tales. He's had a long career in the business.
Oh yeah. Again, he was one of the nicest guys that that I've ever met. He's probably in the top 10 of the wrestlers I've met all time who was just really a nice guy. Him and Kimberly, who he was married to at the time.
Right, Dirty White Girl. Oh, yeah. She was in the
magazines. Dirty White Girl.
Quite a bit.
I told you my story about meeting Tony Anthony backstage.
Yeah, he handled business
Mid-South Coliseum. Yeah, he handled business. He put Tom Burton right in his place.
Tom Burton, my God. Well, we close up this week of Georgia TV, Jamie, with Leroy Brown, Big Red, and Tommy Rich closing the show. Tommy says he can hoop and holler with the best of them. I believe that's whoop and holler, but it's hoop and holler here for the while. Who might have doubt Tommy Rich and his Georgia lingo? Closing the show with some of the top baby faces right now, at least in the headline matches going into the Omni. As we continue on, just a few more results to look at as we close up the show. Chattanooga, January the 9th, Memorial Auditorium, Grand Apollo over Ricky Harris. Kevin Sullivan, double DQ with Jim Garvin. Brad Armstrong, again battling Buzz Sawyer to a draw. They must like that match. Bob Armstrong teaming with Leroy Brown and Big Red, 6-man win over Ron Bass, the Superstar, and Super D by DQ. And in the main event, Indian strap match, for whatever reason, Tommy Rich scoring a win over Austin Idol.
That must be settling an old beef right there. Speaking of beef, the match before,
yes,
that's a lot of beef in the ring too, man. Except for Bob.
Well, yeah.
Bob's a racehorse, as Roddy Piper.
He's the thoroughbred, right?
He's a thoroughbred. He runs off with those skinny legs that he has.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 2 bleach blonde Caucasians wrestling in an Indian strap match to conclude the night. Tommy Rich going over. Usually when you have a strap match, there's a backstory, but I guess we don't need one here, at least not in Chattanooga. As we continue on to Marietta, January 10th, Cobb County Civic Center. It's Jimmy Garvin over Ken Timms. Big Red defeating Ricky Harris. Buzz Sawyer over Grand Apollo. Michael Hayes still here, defeating Austin Idol by DQ. And a 6-man main event, going to see the Armstrongs team with Tommy Rich to defeat Superstar, Super Destroyer, and Ron Bass.
That's a nice main event right there.
Yeah, they've been doing some 6-mans as of late. Not necessarily always the main event, but just with the talent they have, they're making good use of them. And I do like when Leroy Brown and Big Red aren't 2/3 of the team, because we know there's tons of action, actual wrestling action to be had here. And I'm really excited. Outside of Ron Bass, that's a fun main event. And Michael Hayes and Austin Idol, always interesting to see those two in the ring at the same time.
Do you know there's one guy strangely missing from all these results, and I'm going to guess he's gone now.
Feed it to me.
Terry Gordy.
Oh, good call. I always thought Hayes left before Gordy, but
No,
Gordy's going to be at the Omni, though.
Maybe,
maybe not. Who knows? Okay. Well, we'll
find out when we get there.
We will find out not too long from now, because we're working our way that way. Right now, January 11th in Augusta, Bell Auditorium, Ricky Harris defeating Tommy Rogers. So Rogers can't even beat Black Bart, who is not Black Bart yet, by the way, guys. Tommy's been more successful than Harris thus far in his career, but not here in Georgia. Buzz Sawyer double DQ with Big Red. Wow, that had to be interesting. Ron Bass and Kevin Sullivan over Brad Armstrong and Grand Apollo. No doubt Apollo doing the job there. Jimmy Garvin beating Austin Idol. So Michael Hayes can't get the job done, but Jimmy Garvin can defeat Austin Idol, who's done more jobs in this little run than he's done in the last 10 years combined, it feels like. And in the main event, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, coming to town in Augusta, baby, teaming with the Bullet. The American Dream and the Bullet, my God. Wow, that's an amazing team. They're defeating Super Destroyer and the Masked Superstar. Charisma overload, Jamie.
Yeah, you got that right. Could you imagine having Piper, Armstrong, and Dusty and Ole all at the microphone at the same time?
Wow, yeah, that would be something. I mean, you need more than one microphone, that's for sure.
Yeah, Gordon would have to step away and just let those guys talk, because he'd get lost.
And I do want to point out, like I said, they fly Ric Flair in for those interviews, those very brief, generic interviews, because he has no matches upcoming here in the territory, just to get him on cable TV, because as you see, he was not on any of the follow-up house shows. As we continue on, I've got some shows. I don't really have a lot of results, but January 12th in Macon and January 15th in Cartersville, and smack dab in between January 13th, Columbus, Georgia, Municipal Auditorium. Again, no results, but an interesting tag team match. Going to see Dusty team with Leroy Brown to take on Superstar and Super D. So Dusty and bad Leroy Brown, plus a slew of other matches, going to conclude this week's Regional Rasslin episode, Jamie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm guessing Dusty here must have been in for the week before going into the Omni. with him appearing here. But yeah, our first episode of 1982 has come to an end.
Yeah, Dusty pops up midweek, and I'm assuming he's probably working the house shows all the way into the Omni show this coming weekend, which we will cover on the big loaded show next time around, because we're going to kick things off with the next Saturday edition, 6:05, more Georgia Championship Wrestling on TBS, and then it's off to the Sunday night Omni card. We're going to talk all about that, no doubt. More talk. We're going to hear from the Masked Superstar and Tommy Rich, I have to imagine, as well as, well, maybe there'll be a little more between the Hot Rod and the Bullet as well. So stay tuned for all of that and so much more, guys, as we have made it to already the middle of January. We're already halfway through the first month of Georgia Championship Wrestling 1982. Going to be a fun ride. Looking forward to all the talent, all the angles, everything, the matches upcoming. It's going to be a great ride, Jamie. Glad to have you back.
And I can't wait to be back. I mean, I love listening to the Vandal. I love listening to Steve Crawford. I love listening to Gene and my old buddy, Rich Vicek. So you guys aren't going to hear me as often as we did last year, but it doesn't matter because I get to hear all these other experts. And I can't wait until you and I do get together to do this again, Rick.
Oh, absolutely. And, some of these other shows that I'm doing right now, these projects are short-term projects. It's only going to do, about a half dozen shows for some of these projects we have planned. So we will be, back in Georgia 82 a little more often than we were in recent weeks with some of these other projects as they come to a conclusion over the next couple months. As we hit the summer, I think there's going to be a whole lot more Georgia 1982, but we'll be back soon, guys. Before you know it, with more, we're going to see what happens heading into the Omni and beyond on the next episode of Regional Rasslin. Thanks for being here, Jamie.
Thank you for having me, Ray.